The Arizona Territory. Sun beat down mercilessly on the town of Red Ridge in the summer of 1868, turning the main street into a ribbon of dust and desperation. Sheriff Thomas Brennan stood on the weathered planks outside his office, watching a crowd gather near the old cottonwood tree at the edge of town. The air carried voices, angry, frightened, demanding justice for something that had nothing to do with justice at all. Thomas was 42 years old, with lines carved deep into his sun-darkened face and gray threading through his brown beard. He'd been wearing the sty for 8 years, long enough to know that the worst part of his job wasn't dealing with outlaws or drunks. It was dealing with fear dressed up as righteousness. Sheriff. Deputy Clayton Wells rushed up, his young face flushed red beneath his wide-brimmed hat. "They're saying they're gonna hang that Apache woman's baby." Colonel Hargrove gave the order himself. Thomas felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard about the raid 3 days ago. A small Apache band had hit a supply wagon 20 miles south, killed 2 drivers. The army had tracked them into the Chiricahua Mountains and returned with 1 prisoner, a woman, barely alive, with an infant strapped to her back. "Where's the woman now?" Thomas asked, his voice low and controlled. "Dead, sir. Died last night in the army stockade. Fever took her." Clayton swallowed hard. "Colonel says the baby's Apache, and every Apache's a future warrior. Says it's mercy to hang it now, before it grows up to kill white folk." Thomas looked down at the dusty street, at the marks left by countless wagon wheels and boot prints. He thought about his own daughter, Sarah, who'd died of scarlet fever 5 years ago at just 3 years old. He thought about holding her tiny body, about the way his wife Mary had never quite recovered from the loss. "Get my horse," he said quietly. "Sir?" "Get my horse, Clayton. Now." The deputy hesitated only a moment before running toward the stable. Thomas walked into his office, unlocked his gun cabinet, and selected a Winchester rifle. He loaded it methodically, his hands steady, despite the turmoil in his chest. He wasn't a sentimental man. The frontier had beaten most of that out of him years ago. But he was a man who believed in the law, and the law didn't allow for hanging babies, no matter what color their skin. The crowd had swollen to nearly 50 people by the time Thomas rode up on his gray mare. Colonel Hargrove stood at the Santor, a tall man in his 50s, with a military bearing and cold blue eyes. He held a small bundle in his arms, the baby, wrapped in a worn Apache cradleboard decorated with turquoise beads. Sheriff Brennan Hargrove acknowledged him with a curt nod. "You're just in time to witness justice being served." "That's so." Thomas dismounted, rifle held loosely in his right hand. "Funny, I don't recall any trial being held in my jurisdiction. This is army business, Sheriff. Hostile Apache. Falls under military law. That baby hostile, Colonel." Thomas stepped closer, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust. "That baby raid any wagons, kill any soldiers." A murmur ran through the crowd. Thomas could see faces he recognized, merchants, ranchers, their wives. Good people, most of them, but scared people. Fear made folks do terrible things. "The child is Apache," Hargrove said, his voice hardening. "The Apache are at war with the United States. Every Apache child grows into an Apache warrior. It's a mathematical certainty, Sheriff." "Then I guess we should hang every Apache baby we find," Thomas said, letting sarcasm drip from his words. "Maybe dig up the ones already buried, just to be sure." "That's about right. Don't be inflammatory. Hand over the child, Colonel." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me." Thomas raised the rifle slightly, not quite pointing it, but making his intention clear. "That baby's under the protection of Red Ridge law now. You want to hang somebody in my town. You bring me charges, you convene a proper trial, and you get a conviction. Until then that child stays alive. You're making a serious mistake, Brennan. Wouldn't be my first. Thomas took another step forward. The crowd had gone silent, watching this confrontation between civil and military authority. Now I'm asking politely one more time. After that, I stopped being polite. For a long moment, nobody moved. Thomas could feel sweat trickling down his spine. Beneath his shirt, could hear his own heartbeat loud in his ears. He'd never drawn on a US Army officer before. He'd prefer not to start today. Then Hargrove thrust the bundle toward him, with barely controlled fury. Take it then. But when that savage grows up and kills some innocent family, their blood will be on your hands. Thomas holstered his rifle and took the cradle board carefully. The baby inside was tiny, couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Dark eyes stared up at him, without fear, without understanding what had almost happened. A girl, he realized, seeing the traditional Apache girl's clothing. I'll live with that, Thomas said quietly. He mounted his horse one-handed, keeping the baby secured against his chest. As he rode away, he could feel Hargrove's glare burning into his back like desert sun. He'd made an enemy today, and enemies with Colonel Hargrove's connections could make life difficult. But when he looked down at the baby's face, at those eyes, but held nothing but innocent trust, not who he'd make the same choice again. Mary was in the garden when he arrived home, tending to her vegetables in the afternoon heat. She looked up at the sound of his horse, and her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to something softer as she saw what he carried. Thomas. She set down her trowel and walked toward him, wiping dirt from her hands on her apron. What? Whose baby is that? Apache child, he said, dismounting. Mother died, Colonel. Hargrove wanted to hang her. Mary's hand went to her mouth. Dear God, I couldn't let it happen. Mary, I know we never talked about after Sarah. Bring her inside. Mary's voice was firm, her eyes already focused on the baby, with the instinct of a mother. She needs water and food if she can take it, and we need to get her out of that sun. They worked together in the small kitchen of their adobe house on the edge of town. Mary prepared a mixture of goat's milk and water, testing it on her, wrist the way she'd done for Sarah. Thomas watched his wife transform, watched the hollow grief that had lived in her eyes for 5 years retreat, just a little. The baby took the milk eagerly, her small hands gripping Mary's finger with surprising strength. What will we call her? Mary asked softly. I don't know her Apache name, Thomas admitted, if she even had one yet. Her mother never spoke, never told anyone anything before she died. Mary was quiet for a moment, studying the infant's face. Luna. The way you found her under that cottonwood tree, with everyone wanting to end her life under the moon's watch. Luna. It means moon in Spanish, a name that bridges worlds. Thomas nodded slowly. Luna. It's good. That night, after Mary had fallen asleep with Luna in a makeshift crib beside their bed, Thomas sat on his front porch and stared up at the stars. The Apache called this land their home for centuries before white men arrived. Now those same white men wanted to erase every trace of Apache existence, including helpless children. He didn't know what the future held for the little girl sleeping in his house. He didn't know if he'd done the right thing, legally or morally. All he knew was that he couldn't watch a baby hang. Whatever consequences came from that decision, he'd face them. The desert wind whispered through the mesquite trees, carrying the distant howl of coyotes. Somewhere out there, Apache bands still roamed free, fighting for their way of life, against impossible odds. And here, in this small adobe house, one Apache child would grow up safe, were as safe as Thomas Brennan could keep her. 20 years passed like water through the arroyos. sometimes rushing, sometimes barely trickling, but always flowing forward. Redridge grew from a dusty outpost into a proper town with a hotel, a church, and even a schoolhouse. The railroad came through in 1879, bringing prosperity and more people. The Apache Wars that had defined the territory for decades were winding down, with most bands confined to reservations or fled into Mexico. Thomas Brennan was 62 now, his beard gone full white, his movements a little slower, but his eyes still sharp. He'd hung up his sheriff's star 5 years ago, passing it to Clayton Wells, who'd grown into a capable lawman. These days, Thomas ran a small ranch outside town with Mary, raising horses and trying to enjoy whatever peace old age might bring. Luna had grown into a striking young woman, though. She'd left their home 3 years ago. It still hurt to think about, even though Thomas understood why she'd gone. She'd grown up knowing she was different. The other children in Redridge had never been cruel exactly. Thomas's reputation had prevented that, but there had always been distance, always been awareness that Luna Brennan wasn't quite one of them. She'd learned to read and write, learned arithmetic and history from the schoolteacher. She'd helped Mary in the garden and helped Thomas with the horses. She'd been their daughter in every way that mattered. But on her 17th birthday, Luna had come to them with tears in her dark eyes and told them she needed to find her people. She needed to know who she really was, beyond the girl the sheriff had saved from a hanging tree. "I love you both," she'd said, her voice breaking. "You gave me everything, my life, my home, my family. But there's this piece of me that's missing, and I need to find it. I need to understand where I come from." Thomas had wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was dangerous, that the Apache reservations were hard places, full of poverty and despair. But he'd looked at Mary, and Mary had nodded, understanding what he couldn't quite grasp himself. "You'll always have a home here," Mary had told Luna, holding her tight. "Always. No matter how far you go, or how long you're gone." Luna had kissed them both, and ridden away on a paint horse. Thomas had raised from a foal, heading east, toward the San Carlos's reservation. They'd received 3 letters in the years since, brief notes saying she was alive, that she was learning her heritage, that she thought of them often. Now it was May of 1888, and the frontier that Thomas had known was dying. Arizona would be a state soon, the wild places tamed and fenced. He should have been content with that, with the peace and progress. But he wasn't. There was trouble brewing again, new trouble. A group of Apache warriors, led by a man named Taza, had broken from the San Carlos reservation 2 months ago, tired of broken promises and starvation rations. They'd been raiding ranches along the southern border, and the army was mobilizing for one final campaign to hunt them down. And 3 days ago, Thomas had received a telegram that changed everything. He held it now, sitting on his porch in the afternoon shade, reading the words for the 100th time. "Taza group heading your direction. Army pursuit imminent. Civilian scouts requested. Your experience valuable. Report to Fort Callahan immediately." Captain Morrison Thomas crumpled the telegram in his fist. He'd scouted for the army before, back in the 70s, tracking raiders and helping negotiate temporary truces. He knew the territory, knew the Apache better than most white men. But he was old now, and he'd seen enough violence to last several lifetimes. "You're not going." Mary stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. She'd turned 60 herself, her hair silver but her spirit undiminished. "Thomas, you're not a young man anymore. They need scouts who know the territory. They need young men with good eyes and quick reflexes. You're 62 years old with arthritis in your left hip. I can still ride. That's not the point." Mary sat down beside him, taking his weathered hand in hers. You've given enough to this territory. You've worn the star. You've fought in wars. You've kept this town safe for decades. Let someone else do it now. Thomas looked out at the desert landscape he'd called home for so many years. The mountains rose purple in the distance, ancient and indifferent to human struggles. Luna's out there somewhere. Mary went still. What? The San Carlos Reservation. That's where she went. If Towser's group broke out from there, if the army's going after them, ... He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Luna made her choice, Mary said quietly, though he could hear the fear in her voice. She's a grown woman. She's smart and capable. We have to trust that. I know. I do trust her. But if there's fighting, if the army can't tell one Apache from another, ... He shook his head. I need to be there. Maybe I can help prevent bloodshed. Maybe I can make sure innocent people don't get caught in the crossfire. Mary was silent for a long moment. Then she squeezed his hand. You're a stubborn old fool, Thomas Brennan. Yes, ma'am. And I love you for it. God help me. He rode out the next morning, his old Winchester across his saddle and a heavy weight in his chest. The route to Fort Callahan took him through some of the most unforgiving territory in Arizona Rocky Canyons, dry riverbeds, and endless stretches of mesquite and sage. He'd made this journey dozens of times when he was younger. Now every mile felt twice as long. He reached the fort on the second day, his hip aching and his throat parched, despite regular sips from his canteen. Fort Callahan sat on a rise overlooking the Gila River Valley, a cluster of adobe buildings surrounded by a wooden palisade. The American flag snapped in the hot wind above the headquarters building. Captain Morrison turned out to be a career soldier in his 40s, lean and intense with a scar running down his left cheek. He greeted Thomas in his office, a sparse room with maps pinned to every wall. Sheriff Brennan, or should I say, Mr. Brennan now? Just Thomas is fine. Fair enough. Thomas then. Thank you for coming. Morrison gestured to a chair. We've got a situation developing fast. Towser's group, maybe 20 warriors, plus women and children, broke from San Carlos 8 weeks ago. They've been living off the land, avoiding contact mostly, but they hit the Henderson Ranch last week. Killed 2 hands, took horses and supplies. Anyone else hurt? Not yet. But there will be, if we don't resolve this quick. Morrison pointed to a map showing the southern Arizona territory. We've got intelligence suggesting they're heading for the Dragoon Mountains, probably trying to reach Mexico. If they cross the border, this becomes an international incident. Washington wants them stopped before that happens. Thomas studied the map, seeing the terrain in his mind. The Dragoons were rough country, full of hidden canyons and caves. Perfect Apache territory. You'll never catch them in there, not without heavy losses. That's why we need experienced scouts. Men who know how to read sign, how to anticipate Apache movements. Morrison leaned forward. I'm not looking to massacre anyone, Thomas. I want to bring them in peacefully if possible. But I need leverage to make that happen. And if they won't come peacefully, Morrison's expression hardened, then we do what we have to do. But I'd prefer it doesn't come to that. Thomas spent that night in the fort's barracks, listening to young soldiers talk about the upcoming campaign, with the mix of bravado and fear common to men facing battle. He thought about Luna, wondered where she was, what she was doing. Had she gotten caught up in this? Was she with Towser's group, or safe somewhere else? The patrol rode out at dawn, 30 cavalry troopers, 3 scouts including Thomas, and Captain Morrison leading. They headed southeast, following tracks and signs that would have been invisible to untrained eyes, but told Thomas a clear story. A group moving fast but not panicked, keeping to rocky ground to hide their trail, splitting up and rejoining to confuse pursuers. Professional, experienced. This wasn't a raiding party of young hotheads. These were warriors who knew exactly what they were doing. 3 days into the pursuit, they found the first body. It was a cavalry trooper from another patrol, stripped of his weapons and left in a dry wash. The man had been dead less than a day, killed by a single arrow through the chest. Clean, efficient, no torture or mutilation. The Apache was sending a message: "Stay back or this is what happens." Morrison ordered the body buried and pushed the patrol harder. Thomas could feel the mood shifting among the soldiers, from nervous excitement to grim determination. The Apache weren't running scared, they were fighting. On the 5th day, they entered the foothills of the Dragoon Mountains. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to move single file through narrow canyons. Thomas's instincts screamed warnings. This was ambush country, every rock and ridge a potential hiding place. "Captain," he called out, riding up beside Morrison, "we need to pull back, reassess. They know we're following them." They could. The arrow took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him half out of his saddle. Then the whole canyon exploded with gunfire. Apache warriors materialized from positions Thomas hadn't even seen, firing from above and ahead. The cavalry horses screamed and reared. Men shouted, returned fire blindly. Thomas's mare stumbled on loose rock, throwing him hard against a boulder. Pain exploded through his ribs and skull. He lay stunned. For a moment, ears ringing, vision blurred. Around him, chaos, soldiers falling, horses bolting, the crack of rifles echoing off canyon walls. He tried to stand, felt his legs wobble. His rifle was gone, lost in the fall. A warrior appeared above him on the rocks, young and fierce, rifle aimed at Thomas's chest. For a moment their eyes met. Thomas saw determination there, and anger, and something that might have been regret. Then the warrior collapsed, shot by someone behind Thomas. The battle raged on, but Thomas knew they'd lost. The patrol was pinned down, outnumbered, their leadership wounded. This wasn't going to end well. He crawled behind cover, pressing himself against the base of a large boulder. Blood ran down his face from a cut above his eye. His ribs felt like they were on fire. He was too old for this. Mary had been right. He should have stayed home. The firing intensified for another minute, then began to taper off. Thomas risked a glance around his boulder and saw the cavalry retreating back down the canyon, carrying their wounded, leaving their dead. Morrison was being supported by 2 troopers, his shoulder dark with blood. They were abandoning the field. Standard tactical withdrawal from an untenable position, which meant anyone left behind was on their own. Thomas tried to move, but his body refused to cooperate. His vision kept going dark at the edges. He might have broken something in the foreribs, definitely. Maybe his collarbone. He could hear Apache voices now, closer, speaking in their language as they moved through the canyon, checking bodies, retrieving arrows, gathering dropped weapons. This was it then. After 62 years, this was how it ended, alone in a canyon, too old and too stubborn to know when to quit. He closed his eyes and thought of Mary, of her smile, of their life together. He thought of Sarah, his daughter, who died so young, and he thought of Luna, the Apache baby he'd saved from a hanging tree, wondering what become of her, hoping she'd found the peace and identity she'd been searching for. Footsteps approached, soft but purposeful. Thomas kept his eyes closed. No point in watching it come. "Grandfather," a voice said in English, low and urgent, "can you stand?" His eyes snapped open. A figure crouched before him, wearing traditional Apache clothing, leather leggings, a long shirt decorated with beadwork, a red headband holding back long black hair. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with high bones and dark, intelligent eyes. Eyes he recognized. Luna? The name came out as barely a whisper. She smiled, just a slight curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. It's been a long time. Come on, we need to move before the others realize I'm helping you. She pulled him to his feet with surprising strength, supporting his weight when his legs threatened to buckle. Thomas's mind reeled. Luna was here. Luna was with the Apache warriors. Luna had just saved his life. I don't understand later. Right now. Stay quiet and follow exactly where I step. She led him deeper into the canyon, away from the battle site, moving with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and shadow. Thomas struggled to keep up, his body protesting every movement, but Luna's firm grip kept him moving. They climbed a narrow trail that Thomas would never have seen on his own, emerging onto a ledge overlooking the canyon. From here, he could see the aftermath of the ambushed dead soldiers, being stripped of supplies, Apache warriors regrouping, the dust of the retreating cavalry patrol in the distance. Luna guided him into a small cave hidden behind a screen of desert brush. Inside, it was cool and dark, with a small spring trickling from the rocks. "Drink," she commanded, helping him sit. "Then we'll talk." Thomas drank gratefully, the cold water cutting through the dust and blood in his throat. Luna tore strips from her shirt and began cleaning the cut on his forehead with practiced efficiency. "You learned healing," he observed, watching her work, among many things. She didn't meet his eyes, focused on her task. "The Apache taught me who I am. Taught me the stories my mother would have told me. Taught me to fight, to track, to survive in this land that's been ours for generations. Is that why you're with them, with Tows's group?" Now she did look at him, and he saw pain in her expression. "I'm with them because they're my people. Because the government breaks. Every treaty takes every promise back. Starves us on reservations while politicians in Washington get rich off our suffering. Because sometimes fighting back is the only way to maintain dignity. People are dying, Luna. People have been dying. Apache people. My people. For decades, we've been dying from bullets, from disease, from starvation. Nobody cared about that. But now we fight back. Now we defend ourselves, and suddenly we're savages who need to be exterminated." Thomas had no answer. He'd seen the reservations, seen the conditions, seen how promises made were promises broken. He'd told himself for years that progress required sacrifice, that civilization was worth the cost. Now, looking at Luna, at this young woman who was both his daughter and not his daughter, he wasn't so sure. "Your mother," he said softly. "Mary. She worries about you." Luna's expression softened. "I know. I think about her every day. About both of you." She finished bandaging his head and sat back. "When I heard the cavalry was coming, when I saw you with them, ... But all quotes." She shook her head. "I couldn't let you die, grandfather. You saved my life once. I owe you the same. You owe me nothing. Mary and I, we raised you because we wanted to. Because we loved you. I know that. And I love you both too. That's why this is so hard." She stood, pacing the small cave like a caged animal. "I belong to two worlds, and right now those worlds are at war. I can't choose one without betraying the other." "Then don't choose," Thomas said. "Help me instead. Help me stop this before more people die, Apache and white alike. Captain Morrison doesn't want a massacre. If we can negotiate, Taza won't negotiate. He's seen too many treaties broken. He'd rather die free than live in a cage. Then he's going to die. And so are the women and children with him. You know how this ends, Luna. The army has resources, reinforcements. time. The Apache don't. She turned to face him and he saw tears glistening in her eyes. What would you have me do? Come back with me. Talk to Morrison. Maybe there's a way, a reservation with better conditions, a guarantee of supplies, something. But the fighting has to stop. They'll never listen to me. I'm just one woman. You're Luna Brennan, and you're Apache. You bridge both worlds. That makes you more valuable than you realize. For a long moment she was silent, wrestling with something Thomas couldn't quite see. Then she nodded slowly. I'll try. But I can't promise anything. Taza is ... determined. That's all I ask. A chance. They stayed in the cave until nightfall, waiting for the patrols to clear out. Luna brought him food, dried meat and prickly pear fruit and more water. She told him about her time with the Apache, about learning her mother's language, about discovering the name she would have been given, Ordokia, which meant staying together or unity. It seemed prophetic now. As darkness fell, Luna helped Thomas to his feet. His ribs still ached, but he could move better now, the worst of the shock having passed. Can you ride? She asked. If I have to. She led him through the darkness, to a hidden canyon where several horses were picketed. She saddled two quickly and efficiently, and they rode out under a sky blazing with stars. The journey back to Fort Callahan took most of the night. Luna rode beside him, silent and alert, her rifle across her saddle. They encountered no one. The territory was emptier now, most civilians having fled the fighting. As dawn broke pink and gold across the desert, they saw the fort on its rise ahead. Luna reined in her horse, suddenly hesitant. I'll go in first, Thomas said. Explain the situation. Then you come in under a white flag. Captain Morrison is a reasonable man. He'll listen. And if he doesn't, if they arrest me, they won't. I'll make sure of that. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. You always kept your promises, grandfather. I trust you. Still do. Toma rode into Fort Callahan as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, his body aching, but his mind clear. Guards challenged him at the gate, then escorted him immediately to the headquarters building when they recognized him. Captain Morrison sat behind his desk, his left arm in a sling and his face drawn with pain and exhaustion. He looked up as Thomas entered, surprise and relief crossing his features. Brennan? We thought you were dead. How did you? I was saved, Thomas said. Simply, by someone who can help us end this without more bloodshed. But I need your word, Captain. Guaranteed safe passage for a negotiator. No arrests, no detainment. Morrison's eyes narrowed. What negotiator? Someone who speaks for both sides. Someone Taza might actually listen to. Brennan, I don't have time for riddles. I've got a dead and wounded to account for, reinforcements arriving tomorrow, and orders to resolve this situation by any means necessary, which is exactly why you need to listen to me now, before those reinforcements arrive, and this turns into something nobody can stop. Thomas leaned forward, ignoring the pain in his ribs. Give me your word, Captain. Safe passage. Morrison studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. You have it. On my honor as an officer. Thomas walked back outside and raised his arm, signaling toward the eastern hills. A minute later, Luna appeared, riding slowly toward the fort with a white cloth tied to her rifle barrel. Soldiers scrambled to defensive positions, but Morrison emerged from the headquarters building and ordered them to stand down. Luna dismounted at the gate, her movements careful and deliberate. She handed her rifle to a sergeant, then walked toward Morrison and Thomas with her head high and her shoulders straight. Captain Morrison, Thomas said, this is Luna, also called Dokia. She's Apache, but she was raised by me and my wife in Red Ridge. She knows Taza, knows his group. And she's willing. to act as an intermediary if you're willing to negotiate in good faith. Morrison looked Luna up and down, his expression unreadable. Can you get me a meeting with Taza? I can try, Luna said in perfect English, but you need to understand he has no reason to trust you. The last 3 treaties were broken before the ink dried. The last promised supplies never came. His people are starving on the reservation, while agents sell food meant for them to Mexican traders. I'm not responsible for those failures. No, but you represent the same government that made them. So here's what I propose. A meeting, neutral ground, just Taza and 2 of his choosing, you and 2 of yours. No weapons, no tricks. You bring a real offerland with good water, adequate supplies, fair treatment, or you bring nothing. Morrison's jaw tightened. I don't have authority to make those kinds of promises. Then get someone who does. Otherwise this ends with everyone dead and nothing accomplished. Is that what you want your legacy to be, Captain? Another massacre? For a long moment nobody spoke. Thomas watched Morrison wrestling with the decision, watched Luna standing firm and fearless before a man who could order her arrested or shot. She'd grown into someone remarkable, someone who carried the strength of both her worlds. Finally, Morrison nodded. 3 days. I'll send a telegram to the territorial governor, get authorization for real negotiations. Can you arrange the meeting? Yes, Luna, said 3 days. There's a place called Cowboys Springs, 20 miles southeast. Sacred ground to the Apache. Neither side would violate it. I'll be there. And Brennan, you'll come too. You're the only white man some of these Apache might trust. Thomas felt the weight of that responsibility settle on his shoulders. At 62, when he should have been rocking on his porch and watching sunsets, he was being asked to help broker peace between 2 peoples who'd been at war for generations. But looking at Lona, at the hope flickering in her eyes, despite everything, he knew he couldn't refuse. I'll be there, he said. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Morrison sent his telegrams and received responses. Luna rode back into the mountains to speak with Taza. Thomas rested, let his ribs heal, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Mary arrived on the 2nd day, having heard somehow that Thomas was at the fort. She walked into the barracks where he was staying, took one look at his bandaged head and bruised ribs, and pulled him into a fierce embrace. You stubborn old fool, she whispered. So I've been told. Is she here? Is Luna here? She's gone back to the Apache. But Mary, she's alive. She's well. And she's trying to help end this. Mary pulled back, tears streaming down her weathered face. I want to see her. You will. At the meeting. I promise. On the 3rd day, a small group rode out from Fort Callahan. Captain Morrison, Thomas, Mary, and 2 soldiers, carrying only water and bedrolls. No weapons, as promised. They reached Cowboys Springs in the afternoon, a beautiful place where water bubbled up from limestone rocks into a crystal-clear pool surrounded by cottonwood trees. The Apache were already there. Taza stood tall and proud, maybe 40 years old, with scars marking his arms and face. 2 warriors flanked him, both young and fierce-looking. And behind them, Luna. Mary gasped and took a step forward, but Thomas put a hand on her arm. Wait. Let them establish the protocol first. Morrison and Taza faced each other across the pool, neither speaking for a long moment. Then Luna stepped forward, standing between them. Taza, this is Captain Morrison of the United States Army. Captain, this is Taza, war leader of the Free Apache. I'm told you have an offer, Taza said in heavily accented English. Morrison pulled a folded document from his jacket. The territorial governor has authorized the creation of a new reservation, 3,000 acres in the Chiricahua Mountains. with guaranteed water rights from the springs there. Monthly supplies of flour, beef, and blankets, inspected by a civilian agent to prevent theft. And most importantly, recognition of Apache's self-governance within reservation boundaries. No forced relocation, no breaking up of families, no military interference in internal affairs. Tozer took the document, studied it with eyes that had seen too many broken promises. And if we refuse, then the army continues its campaign. Reinforcements are already arriving. You'll be hunted until you're all dead or captured. I'm not saying that as a threat, I'm stating a fact. You know it as well as I do. Better to die free than live as prisoners, is it? Luna's voice cut through the tension. She addressed Taza in Apache, her words flowing with the fluency of native speech. Thomas couldn't understand all of it, but he caught the essence. She was talking about children, about future generations, about the responsibility of leadership. Towser listened, his expression unreadable. When Luna finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring at the water of the spring. "Your daughter speaks wisely," he finally said to Thomas. "She's learned from her people," Thomas replied. "Both her peoples." Taza looked at Luna. "You walk between worlds. Is this white captain's offer genuine?" "I believe so. Morrison's a soldier, not a politician. He keeps his word, and if the politicians break his word later, then we fight again. But at least we try for peace first. At least we give our children a chance to grow up." Taza turned to his two warriors, spoke to them in rapid Apache. They argued. Thomas could tell that much from their gestures and tones. One of them kept pointing back toward the mountains, clearly advocating for continued resistance. The other seemed more uncertain. Finally, Towser raised his hand for silence. He looked at Morrison. "I will accept this offer. But know this, Captain. Your government breaks this treaty. If your agents steal our supplies, if your soldiers violate our boundaries, we will fight again. And next time, there will be no negotiation." "Understood," Morrison said. He extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Taza took it. The formal negotiations lasted another hour, working out details and establishing timelines. But the real work was done. Peace had been chosen over war, at least for now. When the meeting finally broke up, Luna walked over to where Thomas and Mary stood. For a moment, the three of them just looked at each other, a family reunited across impossible distances. Then Mary opened her arms, and Luna fell into them, both women crying openly. Thomas joined them, his own eyes burning with tears he hadn't shed in decades. "I missed you so much," Mary whispered. "Every single day. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Luna pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I had to find myself, had to understand both halves of who I am." "And did you?" Thomas asked. Luna smiled through her tears. "I'm still learning, but I think I'm starting to. I'm Apache. That's in my blood and bone. But I'm also your daughter. Your love raised me, shaped me, made me who I am. I don't have to choose between those things. I can be both." "You can," Mary agreed, touching Luna's face gently. "You always could." They talked for a long time beside that spring, catching up on 3 years of separation. Luna told them about her life with the Apache, the ceremonies she'd learned, the skills she'd acquired, the stories she'd heard about her mother. Thomas and Mary told her about Red Ridge, about the ranch, about the changes coming to the territory. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Luna stood. "I need to go back with my people. Help them transition to the reservation. Make sure the treaty terms are honored." "Will we see you again?" Mary asked, trying to keep the fear from her voice. "Yes, I promise. This time I'm not running away. I'm just finding balance." Luna hugged them both again. "Thank you for everything. for saving my life when I was a baby, for raising me with love, for giving me roots strong enough to let me explore my wings." She walked back to where Tazza and the others waited, then turned one last time to wave. Thomas and Mary waved back, standing together as they'd stood together through so many years of joy and sorrow. "She'll be all right," Thomas said quietly. "I know," Mary replied. "She's stronger than both of us combined." They rode back to Fort Callahan as night fell, stars emerging one by one in the vast desert sky. Thomas thought about the baby he'd saved from a hanging tree 20 years ago, about the choices that had led to this moment. He'd broken military orders that day, defied a colonel, risked his career and reputation. And looking back now, he knew he'd do it all again, without hesitation. Because sometimes saving one life changes everything. Sometimes a single act of mercy ripples outward in ways no one could predict. That baby had grown into a woman who bridged two worlds, who'd saved his life in return, who'd helped broker a peace that might spare hundreds of others. The frontier was changing, the old ways fading, but some things remained constant: the bonds of family, the power of compassion, the hope that different peoples might learn to live together in peace. As they rode through the darkness, Thomas reached over and took Mary's hand. She squeezed back, and they continued on toward home, toward whatever future awaited them, together. The desert wind whispered through the sage, carrying the promise of tomorrow. Tentar novamento claude pod comita arrows, confera semprius respostas, criador de historias sonnet sidemu.